The views and opinions of podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity or the state of Utah.
Nations worldwide face energy challenges and an increasing demand for clean and sustainable energy solutions. Today we're talking with Wayne Aston, CEO of Invictus Sovereign, a firm poised to significantly contribute to Utah's energy future through innovative clean energy investments. From the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, this is Business Elevated, and I'm Pete Codella. Wayne, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Pete. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Tell us how long you've lived and worked in the state of Utah.
So I was born in Mount Pleasant, Utah, and then at a very young age, Dad moved us to Las Vegas. I technically moved back to Utah in '96. So I've been here, my entire adult life, raising family and building business.
My wife and I, when we were first married, lived in Henderson in the Green Valley area of the Vegas Valley.
Oh, yeah. We'd go to Boulder City to play football there.
What do you like to do in Utah's outdoors?
I was fortunate to be one of the luckiest scouts alive, and it got in my blood. And so I was an Eagle Scout with 3 palms and anything at high adventure. I mean, I love camping, skydiving, dirt biking, you name it. I'm in for big adventure. And Utah is really unique because we've got all of these different areas like Moab and our high mountains and, in the Uintas. And so you can pretty much pick what you want to do and do all of it here in Utah. And I love that about the state.
Lots of diversity in our geography for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, you have a degree from University of Utah, David Eccles School of Business in Business and Architecture.
So I need to clarify that. I attended more than enough years at the U of U to get those degrees, dropped out before I got a degree. I switched majors a few times. At one point, I was working on a Russian language major with business and spent nearly 5 years in the AutoCAD program, believing that architecture was my path. And was sitting in class one day and professor was sharing the average high-performing architects and how much they make. And I was already running a tile and stone business and making 5 times that. And I just thought, man, I guess I'm done here. And I walked out and I literally dropped out. But I started my own business at the age of 21. So I was already steeped in the entrepreneurial fire.
Do you speak Russian?
Yeah, я говорю по-русски.
That's awesome. I spent a little time in Russia back when I was at BYU.
Okay. All right. I actually served an LDS mission in Rostov-na-Donu, South Central Russia, and then had the privilege to spend 6 months in Sochi, where they had the Olympic Games a few years ago. Beautiful place.
Well, tell us more about your professional background. I mean, an entrepreneur at heart, it sounds like, and what's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the age of 21, I was faced with, working odd jobs and trying to figure things out as every kid that age, I think, does. Had joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. So I was doing reservist training in Las Vegas, did the mission thing, and was just trying to figure things out and doing school all at the same time. At the age of 21, started this stone and tile business. Now, I had worked for one large company here in town for a while, enough to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I loved construction, loved stone and tile because it was pretty artistic and I like to be able to create with my hands. I did that for over a decade, got to the point where we really were great at what we were doing, but I started to get really depressed about not being able to meet my full potential from an income perspective. I knew I could do more. I was limited with, what my back and my knees and my hands could handle in a day. Wanted to get into something that could use my mind and my education a little bit better. And so the construction background served me very well, and it helped me cultivate this team building mentality and how to manage people. I had a couple crews and that was really good. And I realized young that I was good at enrolling people and building teams. Of course, playing football in high school and then being in the Marine Corps. These are all team building experiences too that are kind of building up to this. And in the early 2000s, I started branching out of construction into finance. And it kind of came about of me just connecting the dots for builders and developers trying to finance their projects. And that evolved quickly. And I got really good at packaging debt and equity and helping others build their dreams. And a few years of making good success there, I decided it feels like I'm a developer by vocation, but that's where my heart and my passion is. And so that's where I've been for over 20 years. I'm in my 29th year as an entrepreneur, and land development is absolutely what I love.
Our son also enlisted in the Marines at age 17. He's 2 years into his assignments.
Good for him. Boy, there's no better way to really do some growing up fast.
He's more mature than many of his peers are.
I imagine so. Appreciate his willingness to serve.
Thank you. And yours also. You host the Frontier Line podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, the Frontier Line is a really fun show that co-host Dave Murray and I started here, I think a year and a half, maybe 2 years back. We completed season 1 last year. We had about 52 episodes there, but the Frontier Line is really focused on contributing a perspicacious attitude around energy and infrastructure, a well-informed place that people can listen in, because Dave and I have taken it upon ourselves to not only discuss our own projects and what we're, endeavoring in energy and infrastructure, but on a global market, what's trending in energy and infrastructure. And there's several things we're going to get into deeper in the show here with you today that are moving so fast. It's almost a daily movement with AI and what AI has done to the energy and infrastructure markets.
Both of you based in Utah?
We are. Dave is also a Utah native, and he lives in Sugar House.
We'll talk about Invictus Sovereign and how you got started.
So Invictus Sovereign is culmination really of all of the things that I've done as an entrepreneur over the years. And that culmination ends up being the combination of land developer and finance, because land developers typically are not fund managers. They typically rely on outside sources to bring, what I call cap stack architecture, or building the financing package for a project. And Invictus Sovereign does both. We're really good at structuring the layers of capitalization, whether it's bonding, commercial debt, equity, specialized financing like CPACE, grants, and other things, tax incentives. In the projects we're working on today, the cap stack has 8 or 9 layers to it. And getting to do that with being the operator, the land developer, means that we're making those strategic decisions to phase a project.
What do you hope your legacy is with that work?
The legacy is to create an impact on humanity, not to be overly altruistic here, but one of the once-in-a-lifetime things that's happening right now is this transition from traditional utility monopolies on energy into a more privatized, privately developed, privately operated energy space. And so our legacy, or our mission here, is to be among the pioneers leading that transition. It's a major transition.
So what criteria do you look for in companies that you partner with, and how do you choose those partnerships that help you contribute to Utah's economy and its energy goals?
Well, contributing to Utah's economy is a big one for us. We are very steeped in the Utah first mentality. That hasn't been always the case here with power generation in Utah, but criteria for partnering with business is we're very people oriented. And I talk about on our show the spectrum of people. There's on the far left side of this there's the transactional folks, and the other side of that spectrum are the relationship focused folks. And they both find success somehow, but on the relationship side of things, I value what you and I could do as partners more than just getting the one deal done. I'd like to do business for 20 or 30 years with you as we can, cultivate a meaningful relationship. So integrity is one of the main things. Can we have fun together, and can we do it in a transparent and trustworthy way?
I've heard Governor Cox say that for a long time, Utah exported energy to others. We're still growing so much that now we're needing energy from others, and we need to increase Utah's energy output. Can you share an example of an investment and its impact?
Well, Invictus Sovereign is a pre-revenue company, but we've already spent millions and millions of dollars developing what we're doing here. And when I say developing, this is all pre-construction development. We're nearly 5 years into the process with our Central Utah project. And I think one of the most impactful things to share about the investments we made so far is bringing on world-class teams. We work with Gensler Architects, largest architecture firm in the world. And they're expensive, but bringing them into this equation means a much higher standard of quality in master planning and designing data center buildings. And, one of the things I get the most excited about with Gensler is their community outreach program and how they work with us as a developer to really quantify and be able to articulate what the value is to a community that we enter. And they've been doing this for so long, for so many well-respected businesses and projects. It helps to have a big company like Gensler Architect with deep, deep understanding on community outreach.
I think that's something our work has in common, and that is doesn't necessarily pay off in 6 months or a year. It's the long game. Economic development takes time. Energy development takes time. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could flip a switch and have nuclear power online? But from what I've heard, it's like an 8 or 10-year process. Is that true?
It has been historically, and I'm going to put most of the onus on NERC, the Nuclear Energy Regulation Commission, for that, I think, undue process. Fortunately, Governor Cox and our legislative caucus today are very aligned with President Trump and his administration and streamlining these regulatory processes to make nuclear deployment happen. And I don't think we're looking at 8 years. I think in certain circumstances, we could see nuclear deployments in Utah within 4 years. So we're really hopeful. We're also part of that pioneering effort. So very hopeful to be able to be one of the first to deploy a nuclear SMR on our project site.
And we've hinted at it, but Governor Cox has an initiative called Operation Gigawatt, and it is to bring another gigawatt of power to Utah. I don't know what a gigawatt of power looks like. Can you explain that? Do you know?
1 gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, and 1 megawatt, I wish I would have come with a statistic on how much the city of Salt Lake uses. I can tell you that a small town in central Utah uses around 12 megawatts total to power all of its homes and businesses and buildings. So 12 megawatts to power a small city. You can kind of extrapolate the math. 1 gigawatt is so much energy. I want to say the entire state only consumes a few gigawatts. I think we're right around 3.8 or 4 gigawatts total for the entire state each year. So adding 1 gigawatt is significant. That's 20%. We add 4 gigawatts, we double it.
It's interesting. For some reason, this conversation is reminding me of infrastructure for transportation, because we can think in terms of, I graduated from BYU in the mid-90s, and there were 2 or 3 lanes on I-15 along the Wasatch Front, from what I remember. And I think in places now, I think there are 6 or 7 lanes. So it sounds like, if I can make an analogy, that in energy terms, we're adding lanes to that freeway by increasing this capacity. And we need it for our growth, and especially to support artificial intelligence and computer processing, all those things.
You just hit the nail on the head. Energy sits at the center of growth in everywhere in the world. There are no rich countries that don't have high energy production. So solving energy opens the pathways for growth, just like you say, the multiple lanes. And that's where I think Utah, over the last 5 decades, maybe has not been totally that focused on the growth because we've exported so much power to California or elsewhere. So now with this new Utah First initiative that we're really focused on, let's develop the power right here in central Utah so it can be consumed in Utah for the growth of Utah and the enrichment and improving lives of Utahns. That's really the goal.
And in economic development, we would love to say yes to every project. We would love to bring capital investment, hundreds of jobs. Sometimes power is a constraint. If there's not enough power, we can't say yes.
Absolutely. And we've talked to a handful of hyperscale data center folks that have shared the frustration with us. They've approached our utility providers. They've been told no. And so they're scrambling for solutions. They're looking at other states where they can get that power. And Governor Cox has recognized that. And that's where our legislators have done a great job of creating new legislation to open this up so we can bring that growth to Utah.
Utah is business friendly. Lots of companies and organizations want to be here. And in some cases, there are things in the way and prevent that from happening. Talk about your strategic involvement with the Utah Inland Port Authority and their Historic Capital Project Areas Plan. I know that you've been engaged there and some work with Fillmore City. Talk about what that looks like.
It's a great question. So I love what the Inland Port Authority is about. They have a really strong initiative creating these port project areas throughout the state of Utah to attract capital and growth. And I was just on the phone with Scott Wolford the other day, who shared that because of their efforts, they've brought in over $2.3 billion of new investment into Utah. As far as the historic Capital Port Project area, we were very instrumental over 2 years ago, approaching Fillmore City, bringing Inland Port Authorities to the table there, going through that process, and then ultimately having that port project area become the 11th port project area in the state of Utah. Now we're actually working on a project area that's a little bit outside of that particular port project area, though we own land near Fillmore. And so we have plans to bring strategic rail expansion through that region of central Utah. And I think that's one of the more important pillars of what Inland Port Authority is about: rail expansion, airport expansion, and environmental and energy. So those really are kind of the core 4 tenets of Inland Port Authorities. We're very happy to be working with them.
And the Port Authority, like the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, can provide some stackable tax credit incentives for these developments.
Absolutely. In addition to tax credits for energy-related, housing-related, transportation-related projects, you also have some really key financing mechanisms. There are actual loans you can get from the Utah Infrastructure Bank, but using tax increment financing and using public infrastructure districts. This is all fairly new legislation in the last few years. These are mechanisms that you hear about in the paper that are leveraged often with Utah Inland Port Authorities, and those are mechanisms that we're actively engaged in using for our projects as well.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Looking for the best place to grow your business? Welcome to Utah, ranked the #1 state for economic outlook 18 years running. Make the move to join global leaders in advanced manufacturing, aerospace and defense, life sciences and healthcare, software and IT, and financial services. With a young, educated workforce, smart tax incentives, and an unmatched quality of life, Utah is where innovation meets opportunity. Learn more at business.utah.gov.
And Wayne, talk a little about the connection between rail and that, railroad connectivity and energy development.
That's an interesting correlation. Rail connectivity historically would have been the critical. If we talk about IPPAT and Delta, you needed rail to bring coal to a coal-fired plant. So that's a direct correlation. Now we're talking about developing natural gas. We're talking about developing nuclear. Rail is not so much that direct impact on those new cleaner modalities, but rail is critical to provide the ancillaries. It's the rail service that can bring manufacturing to life. So if we start with energy today in what we're designing in a natural gas plant or with nuclear SMRs, rail's not the direct service that augments those, but by establishing a new power source, you got to have offtake. You got to have data center offtake. You got to have industrial manufacturing offtake. And in order to get all of that industrial manufacturing offtake really there, you've got to be rail served. So that's the correlation.
How do you think the energy industry can help some of our central Utah counties and areas that their economy is not growing as much as along the Wasatch Front or Washington County?
That's another awesome question, Pete. In talking with Fillmore City Council folks and other folks in central Utah communities, the number one heartburn that they have is this term they use of exporting their children. They raise them and then they have to leave because there's a scarcity of high-paying jobs. And so our goal here is to change that whole dynamic by creating really high-quality and high-paying jobs, specializing on these jobs in next-gen energy production, data center management, advanced manufacturing. Those 3 key things are where the really good jobs are coming. And we'd like to be able to help grow central Utah to rise to that occasion so that those kids in these surrounding counties that haven't had the opportunities for education or for those jobs could get the education and those jobs in central Utah in the future. So that's a very big part of our mission.
And it does seem like a lot of the raw materials, the ingredients for these types of projects to succeed exist in central Utah.
Absolutely. Yes, we have an abundance of natural gas that's in Utah and Wyoming and Idaho. We've got really great air quality. The Wasatch Front is tricky. You couldn't develop a new gas plant in the Wasatch Front because of the air quality, but you get out into an attainment zone in central Utah, and we got lots of wide open space that can take on some new emissions that are much cleaner emissions than we've had in the past. And another exciting thing about what we're designing is a robust water management plan, because everyone's very concerned about water consumption. And where we're operating in central Utah, there is water scarcity. And so we've got to be designing things for a much lower water consumption profile, and also augmenting our water management plan to include new technologies like aquifer reinjection. When we're over pumping aquifers, underground water, and we start seeing reservoirs and lakes drying up as a result of that, it takes folks like us coming in with new technologies and a willingness to pay more to get those technologies into play, but for the long game, for the future of, the area that we're in, so we can improve that water abundance.
How would you describe the competitive landscape of energy providers in the state of Utah?
Boy, that's a good question. And we probably couldn't have even had this conversation a year ago, Pete, honestly, because Utah's a regulated state. Rocky Mountain Power and Pacific Core, parent company Pacific Core, have been kind of that investor-owned utility. It's a Berkshire Hathaway entity. It's been a monopoly, frankly, and they've done a great job expanding their power production to meet the needs of growth historically. And the major one of the once-in-a-lifetime transitions that I'm seeing is with AI coming online, it's totally changed the game. And now traditional utilities have not been able to meet the demands. And so we've got to transition into this new independent power producers. It's very competitive. You've seen a lot of solar come online in Utah in the past 5 to 7 years. I'm aware of a few other natural gas resources that are planning to come online. And we're really determined to solve a big gap in that.
And to be fair, this is not only a Utah problem. I think every region, every state is dealing with how do we increase energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, they all recognize it. And AI driving so many market sectors, down to just, making a Google search on your phone or looking at you're streaming your video on Facebook. Those things require data centers. And the more we consume and the more advanced things get, the more energy we're going to have to produce to support all of that.
So you're a grid resilience partner, which means you're designing and building next generation plants, which we've talked about with AI power management platforms. Can you share how some of your work has impacted a Utah community?
Well, again, we're pre-revenue and we haven't built the plant yet. We're in design phase. So I couldn't speak to how much we've already impacted the community, but being a grid resilience partner is kind of a new opportunity, because with some of the new legislation, you could generate power and you could set up a plant next door to it and you could consume all the power there. And that would be considered an islanded power asset. And that's not connected to our interstate grid. But in order to become connected to the interstate grid, you've got to be able to provide a high standard of power generation and redundancy and quality. And if you can do all of those things and interconnect to the grid, then you can become a true partner to the state of Utah. Where there are outages in other areas, we can provide backups. So that's kind of the mentality behind being a grid resilience partner. And that's something that the Department of Energy Development here in Utah and Governor Cox has been really adamant about, is that we bring on strong baseload power generation. That's not solar, by the way. Solar, it doesn't qualify as baseload. It's intermittent. Unless you add battery or flywheel storage to it, it's not of the quality or frequency that the state really needs to be a true grid resilience partner.
When we drive in some parts of California, we see lots of windmills and power generating wind farms. Do you think there's an opportunity for Utah to do more of that, or is that too difficult?
I wouldn't say it's too difficult. I would say that the appetite for wind has diminished greatly. And we're seeing signals of tax credit rollbacks for solar and wind coming, from the Trump administration. I also feel that deeply within our Utah Legislative Caucus. Though the tax credits have not been rolled back or fully repealed, permitting new wind or solar today is much more challenging than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it comes down to power density. When you start comparing a really clean next-gen gas plant to a solar array, for example, the acreage required to put that solar array comes with great sacrifice. And similar with wind, it's sacrificed to, bird migration routes, it's sacrificed to natural vegetation, and putting, natural gas or nuclear, even better, because that's zero emissions, could go on a much smaller footprint. So using much less land in a much denser modality.
I'm not going to remember the location, but I read a news story recently where a country, I think in Europe, is adding solar panels inside of their train tracks so that they're using that existing real estate, that otherwise goes unused, to help generate some solar energy.
So I think one of the things that Governor Cox has done such a great job with, and it's reflected throughout the legislation, is a pragmatic approach to all of the above. No one's getting pegged or boxed into the all sustainable camp. No one's getting boxed into the fossil fuel only camp. Utah's been very good to stay kind of bipartisan above it all and say, look, it can all be beneficial. We just know we've got to generate more power, and a lot of it, let's bring to bear all of the things that are disposable. And I think that is truly the best approach.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was on my mind as well, that it's an all of the above. It's not a this or that, but we need to use all the tools in the toolkit.
Absolutely.
So talk about opportunities or challenges you see in scaling clean energy infrastructure in Utah.
Fortunately, today, here in July 2025, our legislators have addressed most of the challenges that we faced 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And many of those challenges have already been resolved or cleared. Others, lingering challenges, I have confidence are being cleared as we speak. Right now, I see opportunity. I see big opportunity, and that's reflected in the amount of money and time we're investing in Central Utah. I believe Central Utah is kind of the final frontier of large-scale development for the state of Utah. We haven't seen that in 80 years, and that's really one of the major reasons we're focused in Central Utah, is just opportunity to leverage land, water, air quality, gas availability, and a really strong appetite within the legislation, and new legislation that's actually paved the way to make all of it possible. It's really a combination of all of those factors that present what I'm referring to as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us and for Utah to establish itself as an energy leader in the U.S., and I think that's part of Governor Cox's vision.
How do you think this kind of energy future plays into what we hope to do as we put together and host the 2034 Winter Olympics and Paralympics?
We can still feel the positive effects of the Olympics the last time it came. And when I measure that and I contemplate how much changed with the advent of the Olympics that last time around, it equated to new jobs, new buildings, new facilities, and new awareness of how much actually is here in Utah that folks all over the world will have interest in. We've been ranked number one as a state for entrepreneurship and for job creation and, best place to live. I think we're going to continue to see that trending. I think as we develop more energy and all of the corollaries, more manufacturing, more housing, bringing the data center communities earnestly to Utah because they're not here yet. We have high concentration in Virginia, Phoenix, and Ohio back east, but Utah has not fully met the potential of what's possible there. And I think as that happens, as that develops, you're going to see more people and you're going to see a higher quality of living in Utah. And you're going to see some of the highest wages in the nation. And I think that all really bodes well for the optics that come with the Olympics.
What do you like best about being part of Utah's business community?
Utah has a really endearing attitude and mindset about being pioneers, rightfully so. And that's part of what's the most exciting for me, is recognizing that we are also pioneers in many ways in changing the landscape and improving our state and showing our commitment to the state and its citizens. And I just love working with our legislators. That's a new thing for me. That's new just in the last couple of years because I haven't been so plugged into the political environments. I've been, kind of head down in the private sector for many, many years. But developing energy and developing something on this scale has involved so many stakeholders in the state of Utah to feel their support and their energy and their enthusiasm. It's encouraging, and it's a pleasure to be working with.
I feel like there might be some kind of marketing thing in there to feel their energy for energy development.
Absolutely. We have high energy for energy development, that's for sure.
We've been speaking with Wayne Aston, CEO of Invictus Sovereign. We appreciate you joining us on the Business Elevated podcast.
Absolutely, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Here is a quick update from the Economic Opportunity Office for the week of July 27th, 2025. Applications for the Rural Employment Development Incentive will open August 1st, 2025. The grant supports rural economies in the state by awarding funding to business entities creating new, high-paying jobs in Utah's rural communities. Learn more at business.utah.gov. Congratulations to Mountainhead on its Emmy nomination for Outstanding Television Movie. This HBO original film from Jess Armstrong, the creator of Succession, was filmed in and around Park City, Utah. It is now streaming on HBO Max. Learn more at film.utah.gov. Every great business starts with an idea, and the Startup State Initiative's Get Started Business Idea Challenge is helping turn those ideas into reality. Do you have an idea you want to get off the ground? Apply for the chance to participate at startup.utah.gov. To learn more about any of our updates, please visit business.utah.gov.
Thanks to our office marketing communications team for their work on this episode. You can find and follow us on social media at Business Utah. Please feel free to email us with feedback or episode suggestions at business@utah.gov. The Business Elevated podcast is published by the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. I'm your host, Pete Codella. Thanks for listening.